Hello everybody, it's Gareth Jones here from Paris Technologies with another Rugby World Cup 2023 predictor. This one I'm calling What July Tells Us, and the backstory to this is we've had quite a lot of rugby happening in July, just around about 45 days out from the World Cup starting. So what have we learned from all the rugby that's been played? Well, we saw the under-20 Rugby World Cup where we saw France win against Ireland in the final. South Africa coming third over England, and Australia and New Zealand up there in the top group. So interesting, gives us an indication that France and Ireland are going to be very, very strong. We also saw the Rugby Championship happening. New Zealand look amazingly strong. They definitely look like the favourites now going into the Rugby World Cup. And then we've had we saw South Africa with some good performances, some poor performances, and we saw Argentina amazingly much stronger than anyone predicted. Competitive against New Zealand, pushed South Africa all the way and lost by 1 point, pushed Australia all the way and won by 1 point. And then Australia didn't win the game, competitive against Argentina, but not competitive against New Zealand and South Africa. So potentially a lot of work to do for Australia to be able to be competitive in the World Cup. And then finally, we saw the Pacific nations playing a little bit, and we saw Fiji looking good out of the Pacific nations, Japan playing in that tournament and not surprising at all. They won some games, won one game, I think lost 2 games. So we're not expecting any surprises out of Japan this year. Potentially the only surprise we could expect is maybe from Fiji. All right, putting that all into our model, let's see what could we expect? Well, New Zealand playing really, really well. So we would expect then that New Zealand would win the group against France. And I think, no one will be too surprised if New Zealand won it because, potentially it's going to be a really big game for France at home. Maybe they get a little bit overwhelmed by the occasion, and no one would be too surprised if France came second in that group. In Group B, though, South Africa's performances, the Rugby Championship, up and down. I don't think anyone would be surprised if Ireland won that group with South Africa coming second. This group gets a little bit more interesting. Australia still look like, world-class players. I think everyone expects them to win this group. The interesting one would be Fiji over Wales. Wales haven't played a lot of rugby. They've got quite a few games coming up against some tough opposition against South Africa. Fiji doing well in this Pacific Nations Cup. In this version, I'm going to say Fiji take Wales out of the World Cup. And I think this is one of the interesting games in the pool stages that we're all going to be watching pretty closely. And then finally, Argentina playing so well, I'm going to give Argentina the win in this pool over England. I don't expect any upsets from any of the other teams. So New Zealand win Pool A over France, Ireland over South Africa, Fiji over Wales, and Argentina over England. So what does that mean then when we come to the quarterfinals? Well, we'd get this mouth-watering Australia-England quarterfinal, kind of the old foes. And, here, because we haven't seen England play in July, and this is the July version, I'm going to say, okay, Australia win that one. You'd get this France-Ireland quarterfinal, which I think would be like really tough. I mean, we know that 2 of the top teams are going out to the quarterfinals just because of the way the draws happened. Here, I would say it goes the way of the under-20 World Cup based in this version. So France win it, Ireland out again. And I mean, I think it's going to be, the quarterfinal is going to be really tough for Ireland. We've seen it before. There'll be a lot of media speculation about whether they have the big match temperament, whether they chokers, things like that. And I think it's going to be really tough. So I don't think nobody will be too surprised if they go out. I mean, they've never won a quarterfinal. So I think with the July version, based on what happened in the under-20s, France to win this game. Argentina would then play Fiji. And I mean, based on what we saw in the Rugby Championship, Argentina look really strong this year. So I'm expecting that would be a comfortable win for Argentina. And then you'd get another incredibly tough quarterfinal, New Zealand versus South Africa. And based on what we saw in the Rugby Championship, New Zealand would win that one. So Australia over England, France over Ireland, Argentina for the big win, and defending champs SA out. Would be a big upset, but it's very, very possible and very likely. All right, what does that give us for the semifinals? And you would end up with an Australia-France semi-final. And I think most of the predictions we've seen, we're seeing Australia in this semi-final one. And I think they have an easier road to get there. So I think we can expect that. But I think this potentially where their Rugby World Cup comes to an end, based on what we saw in July anyway. France, we should expect to win this one. Then you'd get this New Zealand-Argentina quarterfinal. And I mean, I think Argentina looked really good this year. And I don't think that they're going to be stopped by anybody other than one of the really big teams. But potentially New Zealand will look really good in the Rugby Championship. So New Zealand take this one. So France over Australia, but New Zealand are through. That would give us a repeat of one of the games in the Rugby Championship for the 3rd, 4th. And because this is the July version, we give it to Argentina again. They did beat Australia in the Rugby Championship by 1 point. So Argentina take it. They come 3rd in the Rugby World Cup. They've done it before, but I think it'll be a great result for them and for rugby in general. And then we have the final, really this July version gives us this really great mouth-watering final. New Zealand against France, a repeat of the group stages. Has this happened before? Yes, it happened when England met South Africa after losing in the group stages. And they went all the way through and made it to the final. So it's not uncommon in the Rugby World Cup for teams that haven't won their group to go all the way to the final. South Africa's done it and won. In this one though, New Zealand, the July results would suggest New Zealand would win it again, and New Zealand over France, and New Zealand take their 4th Rugby World Cup. What does it look like then when we put it all together in the dashboard alongside all the other versions? So we've got all our versions here, and let's see what the last one tells us. Let's let it update. It's going to get the data from the central database, bring it back and display it here for us in Excel. And we watch all of these numbers change. New Zealand over France, South Africa, Ireland over South Africa, Australia over Fiji, and Argentina through. We watch it go through, get to this really interesting semi-final, and there we have it. New Zealand over France. That's your July version.